in this video we're going to discuss midpoint. By the end of the video, I'm hoping that you'll be able to find the midpoint of the segment given two endpoints, and then find the endpoint of a segment given the midpoint and another endpoint. So just some quick things to remember about the midpoint, right? The midpoint is going to refer to the point that is exactly in the middle of a line segment. So that means it is halfway between two endpoints, and we are dividing this segment into two congruent pieces. So if you see my picture that I've drawn up here, right, we have a segment. This midpoint in the middle has now made the left side congruent to the right side. So that's kind of what a midpoint does. Let's look at how we'll solve for a midpoint. So the first method that I'm going to show you to solve for a midpoint is known as stack, add, and divide. So when we're stack, add, and divide, it's exactly as it sounds. We're going to stack the 2 points on top of each other, and we're going to add them together. And then once we've added them together, we're going to divide them by 2. So let's find out what our points are. We've got points 5, -2, and 9, 3, and we're asked to find the midpoint. Make sure you always read through your question to make sure you know what they're asking you for, because we are going to do some where we're solving for an endpoint and not a midpoint. Again, this is stack, add, and divide. So I'm going to take my first point, which is 5, -2, and I'm going to stack my other point, which was 9, 3, underneath, and I'm going to add them together. So I've got 5 plus 9, which is 14, and -2 plus 3, which is 1. All right, so we've stacked and we've added. Now we're going to divide each number by 2. So we get 7 1/2. And this is our midpoint, right? This is an X, this is a Y. This answer is always going to be a point, so please keep that in mind. We've done distance previously, which will be a decimal or a radical, and we've done slope, which will be a fraction. So they all have different types of answers. The midpoint is going to be a point, hence why it says midpoint. So your answer should always be a point. Make sure your answer is not a fraction or a decimal. All right, the second method we're going to be using today is the actual formula for midpoint. So if you are a formula person, this is going to be the method you're going to want to use. All we got to do is plug our pieces in. So let's see what we've got. We're looking for a midpoint, and they're telling us that A is -3, -1, and B is 4, 5. So notice we've got the x1s and the x2s again. So we need to make sure we label everything. So x1 here is -3, y1 is -1, x2 is 4, and y2 is 5. And we're going to plug into our equation. So notice that our x's are first. So we've got x1, which is -3, plus, this is the only one of our equations with a plus, so plus our x2, which is 4, and then we're dividing the whole thing by 2. All right, for our y's, we've got y1, which is -1, plus y2, which is 5. And we're just going to simplify here. So -3 plus 4 gives us -1 over 2, which we can just leave as a fraction. And then we've got -1 plus 5, which gives us 4 over 2. And that one we're going to want to simplify. So we're going to have negative 1/2, comma 2. And that would be our midpoint. So the other sort of method that we could have is we could be asked to find an endpoint. So if we're asked to find an endpoint, we're going to use a new method called EME, which stands for endpoint, midpoint, endpoint. So this type of question is going to be most likely worded as the following. Given the line segment AB with a midpoint of 1, -5, and a point A, -6, -2, find the coordinates of endpoint B. So we're given the midpoint, okay, and we're given another endpoint, and we need to find the second endpoint. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to stack your endpoint that you're given on top. So we know that -6, -2 was our endpoint because it was labeled as a point A. Our midpoint was labeled midpoint, or it would be labeled with an uppercase M, as 1, -5. So we're going to put that in the middle. The midpoint has to go in the middle, so make sure you pay attention to which point is your midpoint. And now we're going to use that to find the endpoint. So we're going to say, how did we get from -2 to -5? We subtracted 3. And we're going to subtract 3 again to get to our new endpoint. The common mistake I see is that we find that we subtracted 3, so we just put -3 at the bottom. That is incorrect. Okay, you want to subtract -3 from -5, which is going to give us -8. And then we're going to do the same thing for the x over here. So from 6 to 1, we added 7. So we're going to add 7 to 1, and we're going to get +8. So our new endpoint, so B equals 8, -8. Again, this is for finding endpoint. So we had 2 methods for finding midpoint and 1 method for finding endpoint. Please pick the one for midpoint that you enjoy the most, and remember, EME is for your endpoint. Look forward to practicing in class with you.